I applied to the PhD program at the University of Michigan in the fall of 2008. What I'd envisioned for my graduate research was completely supplanted by the events of the summer of 2009 in Iran. I matriculated in the fall while watching the post-election turmoil unfold in the country of my birth. By the spring of 2010, when the crisis had largely subsided, I took a course with Jeff Ely, for which I wrote a seminar paper on crowd action in the Green Uprising, the kernel of what would become my PhD dissertation and later this book. When I began writing the seminar paper, I used the Islamic Republic, the Islamic government, and the Islamic State interchangeably. By the summer of 2014, after I had completed my graduate coursework, teaching requirements, and preliminary exams, and was researching and writing my dissertation, I had to go back and remove Islamic State from my chapters. By then, the so-called Islamic State group had spread its tentacles over parts of Syria and Iraq, and referring to the Iranian government as the Islamic State would have been confusing. The Middle East indeed changes quickly, for better or worse, making the job of a graduate history student or a historian all the more interesting and difficult at the same time. While writing this manuscript and keeping it updated, I have often contemplated how this history will unfold in the years ahead. Of course, it is not the job of the historian to make predictions, but I have striven to write this book in a manner that is open-ended in terms of the history that I've chronicled. In other words, this is not merely a book about what happened in 2009 and how the preceding decades informed that history, but also how the Green Uprising can inform subsequent history. At the same time, if I am completely honest, I seriously considered not publishing this manuscript at all and leaving it confined to the dissertation catalog at the University of Michigan. I worried that people or groups would take this research and deploy it in the service of their narrow political agendas. In the end, I decided against burying it because of the connection that I felt to the historical agents present in it. The women and men of this period deserve to have the truth of what happened heard. I do not mean to aggrandize the importance of my scholarship. It may very well be that few read this book. In today's world, fewer and fewer books are being read. In any case, I hope to control its uses and potential abuses by outlining my intentions clearly for the reader. Under no circumstances should this book be used to legitimize confrontation of any kind with Iran. I emphatically believe that the future of Iran should be determined solely by Iranians in Iran, those who know best the reality that they face. More importantly, the fact that Iran's future affects them first and foremost also gives weight to the primacy of their views and wants. They retain their agency and have erupted in revolt time and again. The Green Movement is part of a long, robust, and organic history of Iranians seeking more humane and representative governance. To be clear, Iran's future is not the business of any other person, group, or government. Foreign heads of state, especially those who speak of freedom for Iranians while either denying it to others or enabling and protecting authoritarian regimes, do more harm than good in their supposed support of the Iranian people. Their interference empowers the Iranian government to cast cracking down on dissent as part of an effort to stave off imperialism. Adding to this are Iranians in the expatriate community, from which I come, some of whom fail to listen to their counterparts inside the country, instead telling them what they should want, need, or do. What's more, outside interference has frequently undermined those who seek democratic governance in Iran, with the decisions or actions of another country retarding Iran's organic political evolution. No more obvious example exists than the US-led overthrow of Iran's democratically elected government in 1953. Another example can be found in October 1979, when President Carter decided to allow the Shah into the United States for medical treatment. That decision ultimately led to the militant seizure of the US Embassy in Tehran, a crisis that the Islamists exploited to outmaneuver their opponents and pass their constitution. The subsequent Iraqi invasion gave the state the necessary political cover to consolidate power by castigating its challengers as traitors for criticizing the government at a time of war. 2 decades later, with his Axis of Evil State of the Union address, President George W. Bush inadvertently assisted the conservative backlash in Iran against a moderate president, Mohammad Khatami. Most recently, President Donald Trump has violated international law, subverting the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA or the Iran nuclear deal, by pulling the United States out of the agreement. In doing so, Trump undermined the centrist presidency of Hassan Rouhani by legitimizing the long-standing attacks of his conservative enemies. Before signing the agreement, they had accused Rouhani of naivete for thinking that the US would ever honor its agreements with Iran, and doubted whether America could ever reconcile itself to the outcome of the Iranian Revolution. Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA has certainly given credibility to the conservative push against Rouhani. I firmly believe that sanctions, military strikes, regime change, and especially war will set Iran's struggle for democracy back decades, just as the US-led overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh did in 1953. Above all, such policies would exact a human toll that should be avoided at all costs. Iranians and the people of the region have been through enough. In other words, while this manuscript is a testament to the injustice that so many Iranians have faced at the hands of their own governments, it should not be taken as a license for hawkish foreign policies toward the Persian Gulf country. On a late Thursday afternoon in spring 2006, my father Shahram and I went to the Martyrs section of Behesh Zahra Cemetery in Tehran. What we did not know was that every Thursday before the Islamic Day of Rest, many families gathered beside the graves of loved ones who died in the revolution or war. They had watermelon slices, dates, and candy to give the passersby like us on the promise that we would pray for the souls of their departed. My father and I approached several families to talk with them and express our condolences. I was unable to speak, but my father uttered my every sentiment without me telling him what to say. After visiting the fourth or fifth family, I took a deep breath and stayed back to talk with a chador-clad mother whose son had died in the Iran-Iraq War. She told me something that has stayed with me to this very day and throughout the writing of this manuscript. I hope my son didn't die in vain, and this generation fixes Iran's problems. If Iranian history teaches us anything, it is that every generation is up to the task. I hope that this manuscript attests to the ability of Iranians to rise to the challenge. And I hope we stay out of their way and let them continue with the mantle that generations of fighters have passed on to them.